Yeah, I take all the compliments up front, so appreciate it, Patrick. Excellencies, colleagues and friends, appreciate it. And as co-chair, like Patrick said, of the board of GCA, together with Secretary General Ban, and also as co-founder and co-chair of the 125 Global Climate Business Leaders of the WEF, I would like to thank you for being here today at this wonderful floating headquarters, a kind of ark that adapts on the rising waters around us, thanks to Mayor Abu Taleb of Rotterdam. Thank you very much for being able to be here. This is an important moment of adaptation to the climate agenda. We are 2 months away from COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt, and I'm happy that Mahmoud is here, and I'm happy that Alok is here. The world is working hard on implementation of the Paris Treaty, but we must unfortunately concluding that at this stage we are not yet on track to prevent and reduce CO2 emissions in order to keep global warming beneath the 1.5 degrees Celsius by 2030. Mitigation is, of course, an imperative if we want to have a future, but we cannot escape from the fact that climate change is already there right now. Here in Europe, we have faced a summer wake-up call, devastating heat records, wildfires raging across Spain, Portugal, France, trade disrupted by record low waters in the River Rhine, etc. That's caused by the glacier melt in Switzerland. So since we are unsuccessful in previous decades in reducing the emissions, climate change is now making its presence, and it is felt more and more around the globe. It brings almost the story of the frog in the boiled water and not noticing during that period what is happening. Climate change uses to be something of the future, but like I said, it is something today. And sadly, the countries that are most vulnerable to climate change have done the least to cause it. So in Africa, and the vanguard of vulnerability, and that is why adaptation to climate events are so important and are overwhelming even. Also communities in Africa and other areas, it is so important to address. GCA is fully engaged with governments, with international organizations like WTO, like IMF, like the World Bank, UN, also present here. But we acknowledge that nearly 80% of the trillions that will be needed for adaptation has to come from the private sector, with whom we need to engage much more, with whom is hardly present here today and at the climate agenda. And I speak as someone who is head and heart from the private sector. And I can tell you the private sector is behind its step up on climate adaptation. The private sector is sometimes too slow with mitigation and reduction of emissions, but are working on it, but is quite unaware about the adaptation actions and what need to be done and what they can do in their own supply chains, as well as contributing to the global agenda via their technologies and solutions. GCA, under Patrick's leadership, will step up its efforts to engage and also involve the private sector. The benefits of this are mutual. The private sector can gain from this enormously, and it can contribute to many countries in the world. The private sector companies that are dependent, to give you an example, on agricultural input streams, have a risk, have a vulnerability, and need to become resilient. And I'm thinking about not only the food industry, but also chemistry, pharmaceuticals, others, who need to identify the risk they have in their own supply chains and their own sustainability, their own resilience to climate change. If they don't adapt, they can suffer a lot of losses. But also companies not only in the supply chains, but are in areas located with their locations and sites where water rising, droughts or flooding can jeopardize their operations. So we need to address this. But there's a second reason why the private sector should be involved in this. And that is simply due to the fact that their money, that their solutions, that their technology, that their innovations, that even their business can help countries and societies to become more resilient. And for those two reasons, I believe the private sector should step up. Our aim is to integrate the private sector much more as an actor, and I hope that the governments are also here present, especially from Africa, but also European countries. I hope that they can help me in engaging the private sector. This is a collective effort, all sectors, and we need to step up. Without much higher determination, it's inevitable that the world will be witness to far bigger waves of immigration. And that is a third reason why we need to step up on this whole climate adaptation to make countries much more resilient compared with today. That's a self-interest of Europe, clearly. That's a self-interest of other areas in the world also. And therefore, to conclude, we need the support of all of you. And I'm very glad and even proud that all of you are here. GCA is helping to set the agenda, to do the advocacy, that people know what adaptation is and why it's needed right now. Secondly, we do the research and develop solutions which can be implemented and spread around the world. And thirdly, we are also supporting, facilitating, coordinating sometimes the implementation of those solutions, for example, together with Hakima Desina in the AAAP program. And we do that in the 6 chosen areas: in food, in water, infrastructure, cities, taking care of the finance of it, and involve the next generation youth involvement. With that, we can make GCA's activities contributing to a better world, a more resilient world, a more sustainable world. So let's get on with it, and I look forward to collaborate and to work with all of you, together with my co-chair, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, and of course with our leader of all these operations, Patrick Verkooyen. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much.